Hi, all. Welcome to another episode of the Learning Buzz, the webinar series that Cassie and I are co hosting. And this is the ninth episode that we are holding. And we
Nine
have
episodes.
9 episodes. Yeah, amazing. in fact, in
We're
fact,
almost
there's a
at
lot of
10.
there's a lot more good news around this, Cassie, which I'll hold on till the end of this episode. But yeah, I mean, amazing for the ninth episode. And we are lucky to have Christopher Lind joining us on this. It's a very important topic that we're talking about, and I think Christopher was in a very unique place to kind of add some insight and give us some relevant, information over here. So
Hopefully, because
yeah,
there's lots of conversations about AI going on if people aren't already sick of it. But I think this time, hopefully, we're coming at it from a different angle.
yeah, yeah. So
Christopher, everybody calls it like the A word. Like when you're growing up, you weren't supposed to say the bad words, like the
That's
other
so
word,
funny.
and now we're like, it's the A
It's like
word.
Voldemort, thou that shall
Yeah,
not be named type of a thing.
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's getting a lot of negative review, and it's not without reason. Also, the entire
Yeah.
premise of this particular episode is a gap that nobody's really seeing over there, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's based on this report that came out from MIT, which said that of all the AI initiatives that took place in 2025, 95% of them failed. And then they said that it's not a technology problem. That was the very
No.
interesting thing that was in the report, that it's not a technology problem, it's something else. It's something to do with capability and how human beings are actually picking up towards it. So that's what we are talking about today, the real
Yeah.
learning gap that nobody's talking
Yeah.
about over here.
Christopher, do you classify AI as like a tool or like a helper? Like, how do you define AI? Because, you hear it across every different platform
Yeah.
or conversation of how they're defining it.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the challenges is that when you say the word artificial intelligence, everybody has kind of their own definition of what they mean. And I think that sometimes is complex because even if you hear somebody say, "Oh, this is an AI initiative," you're like, "Well, hang on. Like, what do you mean it's an AI
Mhm.
initiative?" And I actually think that's one of the challenges because in terms of classification of it, I I hate saying anything's ever really truly new because nothing's new under the sun. But I don't know that we've ever dealt with something quite like this. And it really truly is unique because it can be a tool, but it also can grow teeth and fangs and claws in ways that you didn't expect because of its capability and its ability to work on its own. Like it doesn't work on its own. It only ever actually truly does what you tell it. But it because it's predictive, it can kind of go off and do things, but it's still doing what it thought you wanted. And we're really bad at anticipating unintended consequences. So we think, oh, I just set this agent up to do this thing. And you're like, well, right, but that means it also may do this other thing and this other thing and this other. Like, did you think about that stuff? And like a lot of times people are like, no, I didn't think about that. And so I think that is where it should be treated as a tool, but not like we normally have treated tools. And I think that's another one of the problems is a lot of companies are like, hey, we implemented Claude. And you're like, well, what do you mean you implemented it? Because you didn't just
It's
turn
like
it
buying a
on. And
set of
that's,
licenses and giving it to
yeah.
people.
And that's
Yeah.
where we're seeing some of this stuff where people are getting. I mean, I just talked to somebody the other day. They got $100 million bill, that they did not budget for.
Uber.
And so, people have heard the $500 million one, which is the extreme end of it. But I mean, it is not uncommon for some of these things to grow teeth and fangs. And so, yeah, I think the fact that AI can be whatever you want it to be is both the incredible part of it and the most dangerous, unpredictable part of it. Because it can be whatever you want it to be, that also means people can do with it whatever they want if you're not careful, which can be catastrophic. It can be incredible or catastrophic.
Yeah.
What does it mean for organizations? I mean, specifically for large workforces and, companies who would want to, and they're actually feeling the push, right? I mean, if you don't adopt, you're going to
Yeah.
be left behind. What does it mean,
I,
really?
I think that FOMO is part of the problem. Because as much as, and I mean, you even see this from the people who created it. I mean, they've changed their story on what it is and what it does more times than I can count. And so you're like, if the people who made it are not clear on what it is and how it works, why would you think you got to get on, like you're going to miss out on whatever, because whatever it is going to leave you behind. And so I think that FOMO is a real challenge, and there's been a lot of promises. And I actually just published an article this week on Substack about the fact that that's kind of part of the problem is all these checks are starting to bounce. People were promised, oh, this is free, it's unlimited, it'll do whatever you want, it's more capable than every employee you've ever had, and you're like,
Not anymore.
Not, no. I mean, in some ways, it is really capable and robust, and it's getting better. But in some ways, my 2-year-old is more intelligent than AI, and so it is one of these things where people are struggling to go, okay. And then we have to remember too that already coming into the AI boom, which AI is not new, but this boom of generative models, the Transformers really hit in 2022. That's when it went mainstream. We were already really bad at understanding how work happened and what people did and what problems we were trying to solve. Companies already had these grand annual statements of here's the plan for the year. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And nobody really knew, but they just kept running. And so then you throw AI, the world's most powerful accelerant and amplifier, just on top of it. And so a lot of these problems that we're seeing, they aren't inherently new, but AI has turned the volume up. And so you might have spun up a project on a problem you didn't really have defined, and people wasted a bunch of time and money. But it could only go so far, and you could only take it too far without it really blowing up. And I think that's
But
what we're seeing.
it cannot be a skill issue, right? I mean, they're calling it a skill issue where you suddenly are supposed to get the skill on how to use AI, but it's not really a skill issue.
It,
Capability, competency.
this may be people who listen to me sometimes might be like, well, what is it? Like, just answer the question. I'm like, well, but this is the thing. So yes and no. There is, and I actually created a tool called the AI effectiveness rating for this reason, because there is something to be said for the skill of AI use. But it's not this like when we first tried it, and everybody who's been around it knows this because everybody probably got assigned, a prompting class, go take a class on prompting. And it was like, so is that AI? Like, is
Mhm.
AI writing prompts? And it's like, no, it's actually not. It's a suite of skills, and that's kind of how I've defined it. So there is a skill, and that's why people who know how to use AI effectively are very different than people who just know how to talk to Claude or know, what to, so there is that skill, but also going back to it being an amplifier, it also enhances skills that were already in place. And so if you were a bad communicator, you're going to be struggle more because you struggle to communicate with AI to articulate what you're trying to get AI to do. If you don't know how to, make critical decisions or differentiate between, hey, when is this something I should delegate or not delegate? Well, then AI is going to make that worse. And so that's also what we're seeing in companies where bad leaders are kind of becoming worse leaders because now they already didn't understand their teams. They didn't understand how to connect with the work and empathize in this. And now they're like asking Copilot to do it for them. And you're like, oh my gosh, like no wonder it's getting worse. And so I think that's
Yeah.
where there are AI skills that are important. Yes. There's not the skill of AI that people should be pursuing is the way I would frame it.
Christopher, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you come from, like your history of what you've experienced and so on.
Yeah, so I've got this really weird background because I was originally going to be a technologist. I was a kid in the 90s, and so I had an uncle who worked in tech, and so I got computers back before people had computers. And so that's where everybody thought, "Oh, he'll be like the tech CEO because he's a nerd and he's in the basement on the internet." When people were like, "What's the internet?" We had the same conversation. What is the internet, Christopher? Type of a thing. And so everybody thought that's what it would be. And I was going to go to MIT and do software engineering. And that's what I thought. And then I realized I can code, I can write code. It's fine, but it's not really what I'm interested in. And people didn't really know what to do with that because they're like, okay, so what do you like? And I'm like, well, I'm fascinated by how technology changes people. Because that's what I was seeing in the 90s was, whoa, the way people are behaving. I was in ICQ and AOL Instant Messenger, and I'm like, okay, this is going to change the way we just function as a society. And they kind of went, oh, okay, well, we don't have a program for that. So you should just be a teacher. And I thought, well, that's an interesting connection to make, but all right, fine. And so I did. And so I thought I would teach. I was going to teach middle school mathematics and computers. I thought, sure, I guess. And I hated the academic system because I went, this is stupid. Nobody learns like this. Like, you don't stuff people in a room and yap at them and then think magically, especially with technology. I'm like, you want me to talk to them about how the internet works by presenting? I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And so I left that and I truly was lost because I went, well, now I'm really screwed. It's like going to med school and saying, I don't want to be a doctor or teach medicine. So can you help me with this? And so I just kind of floundered a little bit, but companies quickly picked up on the fact that I was fascinated by the way business problems existed, and they always were people related because companies run on people. As much as you have technology and products, they still run on people. People are your buyers, people are the people that run the company. And so I was always looking for ways to go, I'm like, why do you do it like that? Like, technology could do that better, and you should do it like this. And people went, wow, can you do that for us as companies? And again, it's always been this funky. I went to a company and then I found really complex problems that had to do with people, and I was optimizing them with tech. And so I was the chief learning officer for a big healthcare company in 2024. But when 2022 hit, I had already been doing a ton of work with AI. And so I had for a long time. I'm even back in my GE days, I was doing work with NLP, and I won't get technical because then people will be like, what's he talking about? But when OpenAI launched, I went, we're cooked. I'm like, we are cooked. We are not ready for this. And when I saw the adoption, I went, we're really in trouble because at least with the internet, there was quite a few years where people thought like, hey, we built it, a website, ta-da. And you're like, okay, I mean, what? Nobody goes to it type of a thing. And so we had some runway, and we don't have that with AI because it's integrated into everything. And so when my position was eliminated at ChenMed, I kind of went, well, now what? Because I'm a dad of 8 and we just had baby number 8. And so it's kind of one of those like, well, what are you going to do? And once again, my skill set's quirky. So it's like, I don't know. I'm kind of a learning person, but also not. And so that's when I really decided to help people understand this really wild, crazy technology and say, yeah, it's worse than depleted uranium. Like, you can blow yourself up with it. You might blow your company up and everybody around you, or you can create clean energy and you can do really incredible things with it if you're smart about it. But
Depends on how you use
that's
it.
so that's kind of the journey I've been on, and why it's very quirky when it's like, so Christopher, what are you? What do you do? I'm like, wow. Well, that's a complicated question.
But
I
Christopher
I think that's
did
great.
he didn't mention about the AI effectiveness rating tool that he has created, and we will get to that in this session.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something that's very relevant because, like you said, AI initiatives, who is measuring them, and what rubrics, what analytics are we using for this? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the
And if you talk to most companies, they've rolled out AI. But if you say, how effective are your people at using it? They're like, well, what does that mean? I don't even know how to measure or baseline that.
yeah.
And that's a real problem because then when you say, well, how do you help people get better then? People can't grow if they don't have a target. It's impossible. And I think that's why you have so many people just flubbing around with this, burning through millions of dollars of compute on things that are adding little to no value, if not making things worse. And that's what a lot of companies are discovering right now.
That's the problem,
They're
right? I
making things
mean,
worse, like way
yeah.
worse.
Here's an example you mentioned, right? I mean, at the time when internet came out and we had all these the word processing tools, Excel, and all of that, and
Yeah.
if I were to learn how to use Excel and I screw up on one of my spreadsheets, I can still go on for like probably another couple of days till I get it right. There's no further cost over there. But here with
Right.
AI, I
Or
mean, I
somebody's
can't
going to
use that
catch
same
it
loop.
because your Excel sheet might get passed to your boss. And your
Yeah.
boss goes, what are you doing? Like your math is wrong, and it's not going to make it to a board meeting that then makes it a critical decision about the organization.
Yeah. And now with this AI, I mean, I cannot take that much time training somebody on something that's going to cost a lot. So that's one problem. And second thing is what you
Yep.
just mentioned. I mean, there's a tendency to kind of just put it out there saying, hey, this looks good. And once it
Yep.
reaches a boardroom or a client investor meet or something like that, and where it blows up, wow, that's going to be crazy then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Or like
I
we're seeing now, you get a bill and you're like, we don't make this much money. Like, what are we supposed to do about this?
Well, the other thing too, though, Christopher, we're not talking about is agent slop, right? So as people
Mm.
are just
Yes.
making
Yes.
tools and agents to make them to solve one step rather than looking, as you said, the whole entire process organically and say, how does this impact this and this and this? And where's
Yep.
the dependencies? And create an agent that's going to help a larger scope rather than just as one function. And so now we have agent slop and we have tons of agents all over the
Yep.
place creating so many bills and dollars and eating up tokens and whatever we want to, however we want to classify it. But
Yep.
with that, we're not really talking about how do we hone into this. So going back to the learning pieces, right? You started to say, hey, this is where I say, learning and development is a key piece in this whole thing because we need to
Huge.
wrap our arms around it and really say, like, okay, how are we structuring this? What is the
Yep.
format? What are we getting people to do? And we use all kinds of terms, as you said, right? AI and Gen Tech, AGI. People are saying
Yeah.
throwing things like, oh, I have this RAG that goes to and then we have this MCP and API, and then it goes all over the place, and people are like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah. And they
yeah,
gravitate toward it.
that does sound
Yeah,
very effective though, because you used a
yeah,
lot of those techie
yeah.
words that I don't understand.
Right, right. So, as in your role and with the tool that you're creating, I have one more question. Like, while we're looking at how do we measure the effectiveness, how do we actually manage the change behaviors too?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you hit on there that is really important, not only in how things spin out, but I think this is why learning is also super important to this, is that AI is also creating like the Dunning-Kruger effect on a level we've never seen. Because we were all promised that AI is so intelligent and it knows everything. And so now you have people who go, oh, so, and this ties to the change management, because what happens is people go, well, see, I don't need to talk to the other functions or the other departments or these other things anymore because AI, right? Like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a marketing genius, I'm a finance professional, I'm a operations lead, I'm a sales and customer service. And so you're like, wait, what? And so people are doing this stuff in
Mm,
isolation. I think that's again one of the change management components is helping people understand like, no, 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 no. You actually need to collaborate more and understand more and be more curious. And your specialization is actually really, really important. Now, your skill set may be more broad because within your specialization you may need to get better at doing more things, and can you learn more things and expand the horizon of what you do. Yes, but knowing how to do that really, really well in your function is actually exceptionally important, and knowing when to go. I mean, I work with like chief legal officers all the time who are going, and CISO, your point about agents, CTOs and CISOs right now are freaking out because they're like, everyone and their mother is vibe coding an app for their function right now with no idea the implications of what they're doing. And they're hooking up APIs to this and they're having Claude write this and it's doing all this stuff. And they're like, you just recreated our infrastructure. Why? Well, I just asked Claude to do it and it did it. And so I think this goes back to one of these change management components of helping people understand what AI is, what their roles are in this changing world. Because I think that's one of the other things from a change management is everybody was told like, this is coming for you. You're going to be irrelevant if you don't get on board. And people go back to the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs when they feel like they're in survival mode. And so when they're in survival mode, they are freaking out. They're spinning up whatever they can to look busy and productive. They're throwing words around about things they have no clue what they're talking about, all to sound relevant because they're afraid, hey, if I don't do this, I'm going to be out of a job. And I think that's where, as organizations at the senior level, you need to be able to communicate this on a really critical level of here is how we're thinking about our business. Here is the role AI plays in it. Here's the role you play in it and why we need you to not think about what the world looks like without you here, but what the world looks like if you could contribute to these things in new and different ways, and if you could expand the scope of your role, if you could finally work on the things that you've never had capacity to because now you're not doing these other things while also preserving, hey, it's really important you don't overstep your bounds. And I think that's one of the things with change management is everybody was just handed this thing and then said, figure it out or you're gone. And that is a foolish mistake. And I think the other problem is that we're not willing to take the time to do the things. The physics of business has not changed. And I think that's one of the things. People were told like gravity doesn't exist anymore. And you're like, well, yes, it does. If you don't make enough money, your business is going to implode. Like if you just run recklessly in circles, you're going to implode. And so I think that's from a change management. People have kind of gone, they've lost their mind. They've lost their
mm,
mind a little bit. And we need to come back to the pragmatism of, hey, what you do is important. So let's think about what do you actually do? And what parts of that are critical for this? And what parts maybe you spend a lot of time on, but they aren't necessarily inherently super valuable, but you do need to have oversight of them because if you don't, the problems can add up. And I think that's where, from a change management, we almost, I hate saying going back to the basics because people are like, oh, I've heard that before. But I'm like, well, I don't think we really understood the basics. And so going back to some of these basics is more important than ever because now we're saying, give things away to a tool that has no context, no understanding, and can operate at speeds your mind truly cannot fathom. And
yeah,
I think
could be
that's
very
really important.
dangerous in very potential situations,
Very
especially with
dangerous.
models like Fable and all that, right? I mean, never know.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
Yeah.
why L&D ends up in that downstream, right? Where we talk about how do we leverage L&D for your AI strategy, And
Yeah.
change management, change enablement, change adoption, however you want to label it, we're not talking about that. We're not using
No.
it. We're not leveraging it. And so how from your end, like knowing that where L&D is, like where do you see and why do you think L&D ends up in the downstream at AI strategy, but not in the front?
So some of it is the things we've talked about. This is kind of the natural path, and I don't think anybody who's spent any time in L&D, is unfamiliar with this problem. Where people kind of like at the end are like, "Oh yeah, we probably should bring people along for the ride, don't you think?" And you're like,
Mm.
"Duh!" Like we could have avoided a lot of these problems. So some of it is that. To be candid, though, some of it is our own fault.
Mm.
We are cosmically bad at actually being good at one, even articulating what is it we do. If you're like, what
Blindsided.
does
Yeah.
learning do? A lot of times people are like, oh, develop, like we do the same thing we do with AI. We throw out buzzwords, we throw out things. And so business leaders are like, oh, right. Well, we'll be sure to call you when that comes up. Like, And so then we get called with the tail on the dog versus, in the projects I'm been involved with, like a big part of it is really helping them articulate, hey, here's how we help you actually break down what are people doing and what is the gap between what they were doing yesterday, what they are doing today, and what they need to be doing tomorrow. And we want to help close that gap. And we want to do it measurably so that you can actually identify, is this a people issue or is it not? So we can isolate the problem and we don't waste money, time, and energy on things that don't matter. And when you speak in those terms, business leaders do start to go, okay, yeah, I understand. Okay, so then how do we get you involved in that? But when we don't do that, then they don't really know how to work with us. And I know a lot of the work that I've done, especially as I moved up into senior leadership roles, most of my work was helping the rest of the organization understand what is it we do so I know what lane you're in. Once they get that, I never had to fight to be involved in meetings on the front end because they're like, well, yeah, what if I wasn't in the room, people would be like, where's Christopher? We need him here to help us go, what things do we need to think about ahead of time for these people? But sometimes we're not the greatest at doing that. And so it's not surprising when people, after everything's blown up, which is kind of where we are with AI right now. Part of the reason learning is starting to get phone calls is because everybody went, I thought we were done. Like we rolled out Copilot or Claude or Gemini. I didn't realize we weren't even started yet. And so they're like, training? There you go. Like call them. That's usually who we call when everything's on fire. And so I think that's part of the problem is we haven't really done a great job of defining how do skills connect to work and how do you close the gap on skills. And I think there's some real opportunity there, which was part of why I designed the AI effectiveness rate. So we had a strategic way to go to the table and go, listen, here is how you lean in to help break down AI and make it effective with what you're trying to do while also understanding where learning specifically fits.
And what you said is, sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
No, go ahead, Vishar. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask. I mean, you're right? It's not a new problem. It's an age-old
No,
problem that you're
no.
trying to solve. Where
The
you
volume
said
got cranked to like
that's
198, but it's the same problem we've always had.
I mean, we need to define these processes, workflows, and such to such a detail that whatever tool is being used, AI or just a normal automation process, and that happens a lot. I mean, people tend to use AI for everything, where sometimes normal automation, would be enough, sufficient to kind of get the work done. To
Yeah.
understand that difference, I mean, it's very difficult right now, and I don't know how
Yes.
people are kind of approaching that today. That's an L&D problem, actually. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
Vishar, to add on to that, enterprise resource planning, whenever those kinds of projects roll out, training, communication, and change management always get left to the wayside. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
to Christopher's point, they're like, oh, shucks, how are we going to get people to understand how to use this? And then they shove it in at the end. And
Mm,
then we're like, okay, we jump in and we, I don't want to say fix their problems, but we jump in to like connect the pieces of the puzzle so you can bring the people along. And as Christopher was saying, like, I think in today's world, especially with this is the biggest revolution we've had since the industrial revolution, right? So AI is coming along and it's just taking off, and it's kind of spawning off into its own little growth path, and we're like trying to get a hold of it, and
yeah.
not control, but trying to figure out like, hey, how does this work for my organization? But as humans, like we're like, okay, where do we start? So Christopher, from your standpoint, as there might be people on this call or in this webinar or watching it and saying like, okay, Christopher, we talked about all these things and great, you have this tool,
Yep.
but where do I
Yep.
start? I mean, like I'm trying, I have a voice, they're listening to me now. Okay, where do we start?
Yeah. So, I think there's a couple areas. If we're talking about this purely, so there's a difference in the work I do now because I still lean in on some of the learning stuff, but I'm also on the operation side. So let's focus on it through the learning piece of this. And I think, on the learning piece of it, one, there is still the opportunity, and this goes back to the drawing board of what we always should have been doing, which is really pushing what is it that people are supposed to be doing differently that they're not today. And I think that's a question that we just assume that's outlined and that people understand it, and they don't. And even leaders of major projects, if you have any project and you actually ask that question, like, what are people doing today? Do we have that outlined? Do we know what that is? Is that clear? And how do we want that to change tomorrow on the other side? You will watch the room kind of go, that's a really good. Well, here's the PowerPoint deck. This explains the. You're like, no, 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 no. I don't want to see the PowerPoint deck. I want to hear from you. What are they doing today, and how does that change tomorrow? That there's actually a surprising amount of work to answer that simple question. And many times it has not been done. And if you can't do it, you can't actually educate or develop people to be better at it. Because if you don't know what that is, you can't identify what relevant skills are tied to it. And you also can't identify, even just from a practical, tangible, tactical learning, well, how do you enable or teach people if you don't even know what they were doing and what you need them to do now? And sometimes it seems so simple, and I think that's why people gloss over it, because they're like, well, we wouldn't spend millions of dollars on things if we didn't know what they were doing yesterday and what we need them to do tomorrow. And you're like, actually, we spend trillions of dollars on that. And so I think
Define it.
sometimes, yeah, and I think sometimes that's where we need to go back to. And once you do that, and you have to be really obnoxious sometimes because people want to move on. They want to go, we just need to move on. We just need to get here. And you're like, no, actually, we don't. We need to focus here on this. And I think that is a really good starting place. Now, the reason the AI effectiveness rating fits with that is it's like, okay, if there is the word AI associated with this, we then also need to know how effective are the people who we're asking to do with this. How effective are they with AI? Yes, we need to understand their technical fluency, but do they understand how intentional they need to be? Do they have an ethical guardrail for like, when do I do it? When do I not? Do they understand how AI integrates into workflows?
Critical
Like there's a
thinking.
reason that then that pairs with it, but it's not a like, oh, okay, so we do the AI thing. You're like, no, it just becomes something that couples alongside of it that helps people understand, okay, I understand what I need to do and what I need to grow and how I need to get better. And now that I know there's an AI layer, I also understand where I need to grow as it relates to using AI. And so I think going back to that very basic thing that I cannot tell you the percentage of times that has not been defined. It has not been clearly articulated, and that's why things get rolled out and everybody's like, yeah, do the thing now. And they're like, do the thing now. Oh, what do you mean do the thing? Like, what am I supposed to do differently? I have no clue. And that's never articulated to people. And then we wonder why it failed.
Oops, did we lose Christopher?
Oh, but that's okay. Um,
That's fine.
yeah, I
But it's an
think
interesting point what
it
Christopher was saying,
is.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
It, oh,
Vishak, I realized like what he's talking about is we don't do the current state. Like, what is the current state of your organization or
organization.
your area, your department, or the work that you're looking at, right? Like, because you're just saying like, okay, let's throw AI in here, let's fix this, let's do this, let's have it do this, let's do that. It's like, okay, wait, hold, time out. Like, what is the current state? Okay, now where are your people in that current state? Okay, what can we take one piece of that and then just talk about like, okay, if we added in something, what would be the impact? What would your people need to know? How would we need to get them skilled up? And I think that's the hard part, right? Is getting people to that place where we need to understand where do we need to teach them and bring them along and not leave them behind.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the success stories with AI, right? Especially Claude and such Copilot, they're using ways to build skills within the AI to kind of automate entire workflows. What do you mean by building skills? It's basically defining that entire workflow in its entirety as much as possible, as accurately as possible. And that's what they would expect you to do. I mean, AI wouldn't be able to do that. So in
Yeah,
order to define that, we will have to take that first step. And I guess that's what L&D is all about, right? I mean, we've been trying to
yeah,
fight this battle of getting as
yeah,
much information about the current state as possible. Hey, there's
yeah.
Christopher.
Hey, Christopher.
My Wi-Fi literally went out, and so it was one of those. All of a sudden, we disappeared, and I went, "Uh-oh!" But again, I guess being the technical guy, I quick ran like, "Oh, I can
Yay.
set up a hotspot and I can get back on." So hopefully, we didn't miss too much.
Yeah, no,
Not
Christopher, we
much.
were just talking exactly what you're saying. I was telling the shark about I encourage, so in my organization, whenever I go in, I say, well, what's the current state? And they're like, oh,
Yep.
but we wanted to do this for us. I was like, yeah, but what's the current state? Like,
Right.
let's document
Define
what
it.
that current state looks like first. And let's talk about the people who are in there and what they're doing and how are they doing it. Okay, is that really needed? Do we need to
Yes.
create an agent for that function? Or can we look at the people first and look at their skills and where do we need to really work on that? The other
Yeah.
part of the shark and I were talking about was the skills that we're talking about are very different. Like I preach to my organization that it takes curiosity, it takes
Yep.
creativity, it takes critical thinking, and it takes connection, which goes along with
Yes.
communication. And because it goes back to the point where you were saying it's like we need to collaborate with others and not work in a silo. We need to communicate. We need to also partner. So I think a question for you, like as people are going through this, who do you think they need to partner with?
So everybody. No, but I mean truly, because here's the thing. This again, and this is where AI is just such a powerful amplifier. We have operated off assumptions for a long time, and the divide between decision makers and the people doing the work has grown exponentially over the years. And that's a huge problem because you get decision makers going, just what you described. This is what needs to be fixed, and we need to fix it right now. And you're like, do you even know what they do? Type of a thing. Like, well, 30 years ago, I remember back when I was doing, and you're like, you haven't done it in 30 years. How can you possibly, did you ask somebody that actually does the job, do you even do this anymore? And again, people are like, mm, and they don't want to admit, like, well, no, I haven't, and I guess I really don't know how it works because there's this arrogance, like, well, I asked ChatGPT and it told me this is how that works. And it's like, oh yeah, great. So you're basing your decisions on the cognitive intelligence of the collective average of the internet. Genius. I'm sure that's going to go really well. And so I think there is a need to actually talk with the people doing the work. And then really, this is where the cross-functional piece is huge, which is why you define, okay, well, where in work is this happening? We need to find out who gets involved in that process. And then we need to make sure they're here in some capacity representing, hey, is this how this actually works? I mean, I did what you would think would be simple. Hey, we need to build an AI skill for how we do RFPs. Should be easy, right? Like RFP comes in, we fill out spreadsheet. Except that's not actually how it works, because that's not how RFPs come in. That's not who it goes to. That's not who needs to see it. That's not the team members who needs to weigh in on this. Oh, by the way, the support center hasn't been updated in 5 years, so you can't go there. All these operational gaps end up getting shattered, and we just assume, yeah, but AI is smart. It'll fix that. And it's like, no, it won't. And so who needs to be involved in the room? The people actually doing it, and the decision makers need to listen to them. I mean, I've been in meetings where I've had people go, that's not how it works. And I'm like, I literally talk to the people who do the job every day. That is how it works. Nope, it's not, because we changed that. We ran an initiative last year and we don't do it that way. I'm glad you wasted millions of dollars last year to change that. I am telling you, this is how everybody does it today. So you can either listen to that and revisit and figure out what to do with it, or you can keep pouring billions of dollars into these agents to do it. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, let's talk about your tool that you have then, because I'm a bit curious now with understanding, hey, okay, this is going to identify gaps that we have in our operational processes, right?
Yeah.
And so when we start to bring AI in and people are like, okay, learn how to prompt, learn how to use co-work, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. Okay. And you're
Right.
like, okay, great. Now, where do we stand? Like, now it's gonna bring to the surface like this process is broken, this process is broken. Oh, you have this huge gap in your operations. So like your tool comes into play. How does it help
Yeah.
an organization?
So there's two ways. The most basic one is, if I said to you, Cassie or Visakh, how good are you at AI? Chances are you would go, I'm pretty good. Like but you wouldn't be able to say, I am this good and
Specifically.
this is what I like. I know, because I have this number in these areas that have told me this is how good I am and where my development areas are and what I can be doing to get better at that. And that black box is really what it gets at, because I broke it into 6 categories of, this is what using AI effectively is. And so answering the question of, well, do you know how good you are today and where you need to be and how to get there? It's answering that question. Now, where you apply that depends, because the way I've set it up, you can change that based on, well, am I talking in general, or am I talking specifically about, a specific AI use case? Maybe you have an AI project where you go, okay, well, if this is how you do it today, like, do you understand how to use AI related to that? And so what it's really doing is, I used to do it manually. So this was the way I did it, was I would sit and have a conversation with somebody, and I knew what I was looking for. I was asking for questions about the way people made decisions, how they assessed risk, how clear they were with getting focused on what they're shooting at. And so I outlined all of that. But again, similar to using AI well, after I'd done it so many times, I'm like, okay, I understand the process behind this, and I know exactly what I'm looking for and what I'm listening for. That then became scalable. So then what it does is it allows you to have a natural language conversation, almost like you're talking to me, because I've trained a proprietary model on what that looks like. But it's not like trying to, solve everything. It's looking for specific ways for the way you engage with AI, and then says, okay, you're not terribly intentional with AI. Like, that's one of the areas that it's looking for is, do you have a clear goal that you're set out for, and that you know what you're trying to do and how you're going to accomplish it? Do you know when not to lean on things? Do you know how to discern between, how you're making decisions and things like that? And so that's the kind of stuff that it can, either be paired with an AI initiative, so that you can say, yes, the initiative is effective, and our AI development related to it's effective, or on a higher level, if organizations are going, do our employees in general, like we rolled out Claude, do they even know how to use AI? And if not, where are the gaps? And I think that's one of the biggest things is you can look at it at a macro level and go, hey, okay, maybe our people are really intentional. Maybe in our org they're really intentional, but while they don't have the ethical guardrails to make wise decisions, they think any AI use is good AI use. We probably need to do something with this. The CISOs I've worked with have found it to be really helpful because, especially in general terms, all this like ghost AI, shadow AI that people are using comes up where the CISOs are like, wait. Like everybody's talking about this app. Like, what app is this? That's not in our ecosystem. We need to do something about it. So that's really what it is it's designed to answer that question. How is AI being used today and how effective are people using it? And what do we need to do to help improve that so we can mitigate risks and help actually enable people? So that's really what it is and what it's designed to do.
And that's where learning and development actually steps in, right? Because once you have
Yes,
that clear picture of how,
exactly.
the AI journey should be for an organization, then L&D kind of understands, okay, this is where the scaffolding needs to be given. This is how, different types of users need to be given different types of learning experiences so that it's not like a one size fits all thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where L&D leaders have found it super helpful because they're being asked this stuff and they're like, I don't really know how to assess that type of thing. Where this you can now go back to the business with data and say, hey, decision making right now is a gap. We really need to focus on making better decisions because we're asking everybody to use AI to help them make decisions, but we're kind of weak right there. And so if we turn the volume up on this, our decision making is just going to get worse, type of a thing.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's a huge problem, right? I mean, sorry.
Christopher, I have a
Yeah.
question on your tool
Yeah.
though. You've been using this for some time. What are common
Yep.
themes that you're starting to see pop up? Like you see the results on the back end, you're able to aggregate it and say like, oh, this is a very common theme across the number of
Yep.
clients that I have using it. Like, what are the top three things that you're seeing in organizations?
So one of the things that's been interesting to see, and what's funny is I have it, and somebody said they're like, you should actually like do a report on what you've seen in trends because that's the interesting thing is watching how we're moving through the change curve. In the beginning, it's been interesting to watch the shift. So discernment is one of the areas that I looked at. In the beginning, it was like really low. People just kind of like threw anything at AI and thought it was better. And that's starting to swing, but it's actually it's not necessarily improving. It's almost like now the organ is being rejected by the body because people are freaking out about AI. So now instead of just saying, hey, I want to be more discerning with it, they're just saying, I don't use it for anything. And so it's been interesting. It kind of started picking up and then it's kind of coming back down. Um, one of
The
the
token
ones that
maxing is
has
a huge problem also, right? I mean,
well, yeah, and that's the thing is when you actually dig into the data point around discernment, it's like either people are being really reckless or they're just rejecting it outright. We're kind of seeing this polarization of AI use, which is really interesting. The one that is historically really, really bad is workflow integration. So that's an area that I look for is like, is this integrated into your workflow or is it just like a thing you use when it comes to mind or you just kind of and that is a huge gap and that's where I see so much of the AI projects fail is it's not integrated into people's work. This is one of the areas that I'm like, look, it doesn't matter how powerful or capable AI is if it doesn't actually integrate into the work people are doing, it's not going to work. And this is a huge gap. When you even if you talk to most people about how they use an AI tool on a regular basis, most of them were getting better, but it's usually not integrated into people's workflow. It's like a thing they do later or when,
separately.
well, when this problem pops up, I do this. And it's this very just kind of ad hoc usage versus, oh, I do this and so AI helps me right here all the time. And that's why a lot of these automations are a mess because they haven't gone, oh, I do this all the time. Maybe if I automate parts of this on a consistent basis, it'll help me accelerate. That's it. That's probably one of the huge technical fluency. It's not moving up where it should. Most people still don't understand how these transformers and these AI models work. But that's getting better. At least people kind of understand the tech around it.
Wow, I think about that, and that goes back throughout our whole conversation we've talked about. So one
Yeah.
is identifying what is the current state of your work, right? Then it's
Yeah.
identifying what are the workflows that we have in place that are repetitive, that we could use AI to create efficiencies, not just can I have AI build and fix all these workflows or do all these workflows for me. And then the
Yeah.
other thing that we talked about is the people who are impacted by those areas of work, what are their skills, right? And then
Yep.
how do they contribute to this workflow that we're talking about? So it's like a whole cycle, but
It
throughout that
is.
cycle, we're also talking about how are we adapting for those change behaviors or managing that change management for the people, because now we're going to operate very differently.
Yeah.
And I think in L&D, that's all L&D, whether or not we believe it or not. L&D is no
Yep.
longer traditional in the sense of we stand, deliver, we create e-learnings, we do virtual webinar trainings or, lunch and learns. It's now we're in the business. We're in the business, like in every segment of the business. And I think that's the hard part. Some L&D professionals are having to make that switch and that mind shift and change. And so for L&D professionals out there, what would be some advice you would give them, Christopher? Like, because it's evolving, I talk to so many colleagues in our profession and even here where I live, and they're like, yeah, we just identified a tool and now I have to figure out how I'm going to train people. And shucks, we missed him.
I
But
think
hopefully
we
when he
missed
jumps
Chris.
back on the call, we'll get him back on. But I think this is a question that is posed to a lot of people. It's like, how do L&D professionals get started? Where do they get
Yeah.
started? And
Yeah.
that's the harder part. So what would be some
Yeah.
advice you would give them?
Um, and one thing that I want to add before I answer that question is one thing that I think is actually really encouraging in the data is one of the data points I look at is ethical alignment. And one of the things I'm really encouraged about is that actually historically has always scored the highest, and it's increasing even higher, which I'm actually really encouraged because people are caring much more about, hey, I do want to use this well. Like I want to genuinely use this well. But I think the problem is when you see things like technical fluency really low or intentionality or workflow integration flow, it's like people, and that's where I am encouraged. People want to do the right thing. They want to go down the right path. Not every organization, but in most, you do see that. Um, but now it's about helping people close the gap. So I think getting back to your point of like, so where do you start? I think if you have existing projects, a big part of it is being relentless about what we talked about earlier, which is this whole like,
Right.
what if you're L&D, you need to be relentless on what do they do today and how does that differ? And if they won't invite those people in the room, then you need to be relentless about go talk to the people who do it. Like go actually ask them, hey, I just had something recently where a company was going to spend a lot of money spinning up Claude skills. And I went and talked to the people on the front line. They're like, nope, we have already decided, these are the strategic, whatever. And I went and talked to people and I said, do you even do any of these things? And they're like, no, no. And I go, would you even use these skills? And they're like, no, we wouldn't, because that's not even what we do. And actually, what you just described, we actually were told we aren't even supposed to do that. So I don't even know why there's a skill. And so I brought that back and I said, and they're like, no, Christopher, that's wrong. That's not true. That's not how it. And I go, yes, it is. And I would not shut up until they actually listened. And then they did. And they were like, wow, we would have spent like a lot of money on this and it would have got, and I'm like, I know. So now we were able to get focused on that. And I think that is something we actually are uniquely positioned to do. But we've got to lean into that strength, and we've got to go, no, shut up and listen to me. Like, listen to me, but we actually have to be able to back it with,
Yeah.
I've talked to these people. I know what they do. And you have to talk in language they understand, which is why talk to the people who do it. They'll tell you, they'll explain to you how this is. So I think that's one. If you're specifically somebody who is tasked with, we need to do training on AI, or we need to do more with AI. That is where the AI effectiveness rating is really helpful, because it gives you data to operate off of, to say, okay, you said do AI. Well, you know what we did? We actually implemented this thing to see where are we strong and where we are weak. We got the data back, and based on the data, this is where we have an opportunity to do it. And guess what? We actually have a tool that can measure it now, so we can do some work, and then we can run it again and see, did people actually get better? We can actually assess, did people get better at skills? Now, the fun part about this is the technology I use to do it can actually be used with other things too. So it all of a sudden starts people's heads spinning, where they're like, well, could we do this kind of thing with like leadership? Like with the way people, and I'm like, yeah, you can. Like that's the whole point, is it's designed to actually help people see how skilled they are at something, which is a powerful thing.
So your tool that you design is not just AI, it's an effectiveness tool.
Yeah, it's really a skill analytics and assessment tool, for
Oh.
things where it's like you're trying to assess how capable is someone. And what's funny, I don't formally call it this, but and so hopefully nobody's offended when I say this, but it has a built-in bullshit meter that actually, like, because people are good at just talking, and now they have these AI tools where they can like ask it to give it the thing,
Yeah.
and it can kind of tell, like, this person actually know what they're talking about, or are they just bullshitting right now? And so
Yeah.
it's got that built into it to kind of assess, like, because that's the one thing AI is phenomenal at, is pattern recognition. It is amazing at pattern recognition. And so it can start to look for patterns and go, yeah, I can tell the difference between somebody who is speaking
Authentic.
intelligently about AI versus somebody who's reading the talking points they just read on LinkedIn. And so they're throwing a bunch of gobbledygook around, but they don't really know what they're talking about. And again, it can apply that to, oh, somebody can use the word leadership and say servant leadership and adaptive leadership, and I lead with empathy and blah, blah. And you're like, do you though? Because you didn't give a single example of what you've actually done. And so it's designed to help identify some of that stuff in real meaningful ways.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Well, we're going to end with something fun. We have like 3 minutes left. And I know, Visakh, I'm going to throw you for a loop here. If you had a magic wand and you're granted 3 wishes and you could use that magic wand to execute your 3 wishes, what would those 3 wishes be?
My first wish would be to get access to Fable as soon as possible, probably unlimited. Yeah, I mean, the other two would be more or less dependent on getting more data out, because right now there's a lot of AI slop and there's a lot of things that are going around which we don't know. I mean, anything that comes up on a reel, my mind is like, is this really real or is this AI generated? I mean, so a little bit of honesty. If there is some way we can figure out, okay, what I'm seeing in front of me, is this really real or if it's, something else, that would be really awesome for me.
Christopher, what would your answers be? And it doesn't have to be AI related. It could be like, I
Yeah.
would, travel around, go to the
Sure.
moon, travel around the moon, go to Mars. I don't know, whatever you want to
Okay.
say.
So I think one of them would be, I wish I could flip a switch and people started operating out of an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. Because when we operate out of scarcity, we are very reckless. We are afraid of, like, there won't be enough for me, so I gotta. And when we operate out of abundance, we're like, there's more than enough, and we have more than enough for everybody. So we should be giving freely. We should be doing it that way, and we operate from a much more healthy. So if I could just flip that switch and everybody went, oh yeah, duh. Like, I don't need to try and hoard for myself because we're good. Like, there's enough for all of us. That would be amazing. I think something else I would love is if I could flip a switch where people just truly realized how incredible humans are. And we just had an inherent value for humans everywhere. Like none of this, like, well, certain human, no, all of them. Just because they're not like you, they are incredible and gifted and talented. And if I could flip a switch and everybody just believed that, I would love that. And I don't know if, yeah, I actually think if we nailed those two, I'd probably be pretty happy. Start there. I'll
Big ones.
save my third.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate this time that you spent with us. And, hey, if any of you are looking to connect with Christopher, definitely look him up on LinkedIn. Any of you are interested in his tool, definitely reach out to him. He does check his LinkedIn, right? Christopher, you do check your
I
LinkedIn
do.
and get
Yeah, I do.
messages.
That's the one
Yeah.
thing. Going back to my article this week was on human agency. And one of the biggest mistakes we're making right now is we're giving away our agency. And I'm like, nope. If something is from Christopher, it's from Christopher. My stamp is on it. And so if you get a message from me, it's from me. It's actually from me. I'm not interested in having somebody pretend to be me that isn't me. And so, yeah, it is me.
Nice. Well, thank you for spending the time with us. On behalf of Visakh, myself, and Apostle, we are so happy that Christopher was here today. We learned a lot, and we hope that you will join us for our next session. And Visakh, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yes, I do. Remember, I told you about that surprise. I mean, so we're getting a lot of visibility and popularity, and so looks like we would be having more sessions of the Learning Bus, not just monthly, once in a month event, but it'd be more. So that's what we are gearing towards. Yeah, looks like we'll be
Stay
having
tuned,
a busy few
everyone.
months.
You'll hear more from us.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thanks everyone for joining. Good night. Good morning. Have a great day. Have a great Friday Eve and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Take care. Bye.